Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star sports podcast presented by First Federal Bank. It's Thursday, June 2nd, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. We're talking Chiefs today with beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell and focusing on wide receiver and running back. Even with the loss of three of their four top wide receivers from last season, the Chiefs must feel like they're in pretty good shape with the likes of Mecole Hardman, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, JuJu Smith-Schuster, and draft pick SKyy Moore, plus candidates like Josh Moore, Daurice Fountain, Justyn Ross, Cornell Powell, and Justin Watson, and more will make the competition fierce for the final couple of spots. We also get into running back, where Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the presumed starter, but how do Ronald Jones, Derek Gore, and even draft pick Isaiah Pacheco fit into the mix? It's always great to catch up with the beat writers, so let's get started. We're here with Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell talking Chiefs, and guys, I don't know about your yards or your neighborhoods, but I'm looking at standing water in my backyard now. It has just been pouring over this whole metro area for a few days. And that got me thinking about the Chiefs practice facility. They have the ability to go indoors when the weather is inclement like this. And I know it sounds kind of, elementary, but it seems to me pretty important that they're able to just take it off from the outdoor grass into the indoor artificial turf. And it hasn't always been like that in football. Maybe as long as we've been covering it, it's been like that you've had indoor facilities. But I can remember seeing photographs of practices by NFL teams outdoors in the rain. So don't they, Herbie, like at a drop of a hat, a drop of a rain, they'll take this thing indoors, won't they?
It depends. Like Andy Reid, it depends on the rain. Okay. If it's a lot of wind involved, or if it's a lot of wind involved, absolutely, they'll probably move indoors. Lightning, they'll absolutely move indoors. But a light sprinkle, we've been out there before when there's been light sprinkles. Sometimes the Chiefs PR will say, make sure you bring your umbrella. And so, you have to come prepared. But yeah, you're right. The old days, you're out there, rain, snow, sun or shine, whatever. They're out there.
Yeah, and look, indoor practice facilities are somewhat of a modern phenomenon. I was trying to find what the first one may have been, the first school or team to use one. And, back in, these things started springing up in colleges in the 90s and they became part of the arms race. Like Jesse at KU, I remember it was a really big deal when they opened up that indoor facility next to the stadium. I want to say that was, I don't know, was it around pre-Orange? I think it was pre-Orange Bowl season when that thing opened. Do you remember?
Their indoor facility? Well, they had to use ant chutes, which was kind of like a half track sort of thing. And that's what they used for a long time, but it wasn't very convenient. It was kind of away from the football. So they just opened their indoor here a couple years ago, which has been really convenient. It's right across the street from the football stadium. But to your guys' point, the bigger part of this is coaches can preach, hey, grind through toughness or, whatever you want to say. And some of that is important to kind of get that mindset, that mentality. But a bigger thing is just to have your guys learn. You know what I mean? You got to know the offense. You got to understand the plays. You got to understand what guys are wanting. And when the elements are kind of taking away from that and making you lose focus, that's really where you want to move indoors and make sure that you have all the learning that takes place that needs to take place. So I know KU has been really happy with their indoor facility. And like you said, Blair, it's been kind of an arms race in college football. But as far as an NFL team goes, that really is something they should have ready to go if at the drop of a hat, just because they need to get this learning in just like everybody else.
Yeah, the good thing about the indoor facility too, Blair, when we're talking about the offseason, regular season, it really comes into play. Because if you're a cold weather team who's getting ready to go play in a hot city, or you're going to be playing inside of a dome, it makes no sense to, because most coaches like to replicate game day conditions. So if you're playing in the dome, it makes no sense to be practicing outdoors.
Right. That's a good point. And the other thing that I think about is when the Chiefs started training in St. Joe, one of the reasons they picked St. Joe is because Missouri Western had an indoor facility, or they had made plans to build an indoor facility to accommodate the Chiefs. So that it's really important during training camp when they're at St. Joe to have a place they can walk up the hill and finish their morning workout indoors out of the rain. And now you're talking about more than 100 personnel marching up the, at least in the first couple of weeks of training camp, going up the hill and going inside. These things have to be big enough. They have to be a football, field size at least. And that was I can remember some of the early ones in colleges weren't, they were like 50 yards, or fields were like, they had a half a field in them. And, they thought, well, at least we got something, but no, you need a whole field now. And that's why those things are kind of massive. They're pretty large facilities on campus. Well, anyway, it got me thinking about the convenience now. And in colleges, every school has to have one. In the NFL, everybody, of course, has one. An indoor,
except the Bengals.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, right now the Cincinnati Municipal they've been in negotiation with the Bengals to build an indoor facility. It's the Bengals. You make the Super Bowl now, all of a sudden you can say, hey, it's about time you take care of us.
Which I should say, man, I had no idea. My mind goes back to that AFC Championship game, a million years ago, when it was like the coldest game on record, when they beat the Chargers. And I shudder to think they didn't have a place to practice indoors that week. It was like 50 below in the wind chill. Well, anyway, so we've already had one media availability during OTAs. We're going to have another one here in a day or two. And I want to go back and find out what did we learn from the first week of Chiefs first week of phase 3 of OTAs and the first media availability. We did get to speak with Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the new safety, Justin Reid. And we played most of those in the podcast last week. But any big takeaways from you, Herbie, on the first week and what was said afterwards?
Well, some of the biggest takeaways, unfortunately, we can't report. That's the only bad thing about it.
Explain that.
Well, NFL OTA rules specifically say media availability. You cannot report who's lining up where. You cannot report specific plays. The only thing that you're limited to is who made good catches, etc. And as we've talked about in depth at the last week's show, you have to be careful when you're talking about Jesse Newell making the phenomenal catch against Herbie Teope, who can't put his hands on him. So, of course, those are the kinds of things we're going to feed the hype because, that's what we do. We're media and it's football. So, Jesse Newell making the catch, you got to put that in perspective. He's not in pads. The defense can't put his hands on him. They can't jam him at the line of scrimmage. But, when we go out there specifically, we can't report who's lining up where. And that's, you have to wait until training camp for that. Biggest takeaways for me is when I'm out there, I like to see, you start setting the table for training camp, especially these camp battles that are highly important. One of the things that really stood out to me was SKyy Moore is still dealing with the hamstring injury. Rookie mini camp, Andy Reid said, hey, we expect him to be a full go during OTAs, or they expected him back in OTAs. First week, he's still holding his helmet off to the sideline, and he's their second-round draft pick. The other thing, Mecole Hardman now has a hamstring injury. Those are two of arguably their top 5 wide receivers. And when they're out, that opens the door for others. Okay. And then, so, you have to take advantage of the repetitions. And, the other thing, Jody Fortune's back out there, which was huge. That's the first thing I looked for. I walked out there, take head count. Hey, 88's out there. He has a right sleeve on his leg. Of course, you can report that, but, where he's lining up and how much he's participating, you're kind of like, there's that fine line you have to walk.
Jody Fortune did not attend Kansas State, but he might as well have, the way that you have fallen for this guy. I like him too. And he only caught like 5 balls last year, but 2 of them were for touchdowns. And I could see him being he was working his way into becoming a bigger part of the offense. And all right, Jesse, so you're new to this NFL beat, so maybe you haven't picked up all the rules yet. So who did you see lining up where on the first week?
Yeah, what's the old saying? I'd rather beg forgiveness than ask permission, that sort of thing. So here, I'll just rattle off everything and get myself in trouble.
Too deep as you saw it.
Honestly, Blair, so they have these guys come talk to reporters, which I think that is fascinating in itself. And you kind of hear from these guys. And that's probably more my bigger takeaways, hearing Patrick Mahomes talk, hearing Justin Reid talk, which I thought was pretty fascinating because obviously the Chiefs aren't just losing a major play caller player at the back end of their defense in Tyrann Mathieu, but also the guy that was sort of a go-to team spokesperson. And Justin Reid, just from a couple minutes being there with him, seems like he's kind of ready to take on that role for the Chiefs. And that might be something that they need on that back end, again, with Tyrann Mathieu no longer with them. So that was interesting. Obviously, a lot of talk about Patrick Mahomes and him, the amount of faith it takes from the coaching staff, Andy Reid and those guys, to let him basically run his own session down in Texas with the receivers, and how they're trying to catch up, if you will. And I think it's something important to keep in mind with this receiving core, which is you really can't put a value, or maybe you can't speak enough about how much these guys have learned to play with Patrick Mahomes, like a Tyreek Hill. Even Patrick was talking about this. Hey, the playbook says to run this certain route, and you learn that certain route, but then I want you to learn how I want you to run the route, and then how you see the coverage. And so you could see at points here in this OTA, at least the first one, where Patrick Mahomes would be with one of his new receivers, like a JuJu or a Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and kind of point with his arm, like, hey, you went in this direction, I want you at this direction, sort of thing. So I think that's something interesting to keep in mind. Those guys are trying to catch up. They're trying to get those reps in, but at the beginning of the season, I think it's still going to be pretty tough. I mean, you really can't replicate having however many years it was, 5-6 years with Tyreek Hill and that connection he had with Patrick Mahomes. It's going to take a little while, I think, for those guys to completely be on the same page. And especially at the NFL, you have to be on the same page. I mean, the receivers are running option routes. They're reading the coverage in front of them, and then they've got to be on the same page with the quarterback. I think this all loops back to the bigger thing. The biggest thing I took from this OTA is the receiver position is going to be fascinating. And it's sort of lost in translation, I think, sometimes, because if you go back, and this is available online, like on YouTube, but if you hear Patrick Mahomes talking about his receivers, he was asked about Justyn Ross. Hey, what's your first impression? He said, hey, you can see he has talent, but he's just a little bit off sometimes. He's making these crazy catches, but you can see talent is there. And he was asked about Justin Watson, a former receiver from the Tampa Bay Bucks. And he's like, man, he was down in Texas. I can't believe how fast he was. But it's funny because kind of the Justyn Ross hype train has left the station. I saw a lot of people kind of quote tweeting that out there and blowing up online. Oh my God, Patrick Mahomes thinks Justyn Ross is the next coming of, whoever, where it's sort of like, well, he was asked about Justyn Ross. He has to say something, he can't. I'm not saying Justyn Ross is bad. I'm just saying, like, Patrick Mahomes is a professional. He's answering the question. He's saying, hey, he's got some good qualities. He's got some bad qualities. But if you take out a snippet of it, it sure looks like Justyn Ross, is the next Pro Bowler. And I just don't think that's the case. And there's just so many questions. I mean, Josh Gordon, Herbie's talked about Daurice Fountain, who's a special teams guy. They're only going to keep 5 or 6 receivers. You already talked about 4 we know they're going to keep when it's talking about SKyy Moore, Mecole Hardman, MVS, and JuJu Smith-Schuster. So that competition is really fascinating to me. It's so interesting hearing the narratives about all these guys and then kind of thinking about the roster crunch and the reality that's there, which is all these guys are battling for 1 or 2 spots. And, whatever Patrick Mahomes says about these guys, obviously some snippets get blown up, some of them don't. But the Justyn Ross, Justin Watson, Josh Gordon, Daurice Fountain, that sort of competition for the last 1 or 2 spots, that's going to be something we'll all keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's the OTA of the Justyns, right? That's we're all about the Justyns here. But I think there's a difference. And Herbie, as a longtime NFL writer, I think there's a difference between Patrick Mahomes being asked about a player and him complimenting the player like Justyn Ross, and then him volunteering a name like he did with Justyn Watson. I think that was the case. I don't think he was asked about Justyn Watson. I think he volunteered that.
He was asked about Justyn Watson. I think it was Matt Derrick that asked him about him, but he just kind of asked about one particular play. But it seemed like you're talking about, Blair, he kind of went above and beyond. But I'll get to you, Herbie. But he did get asked about him, but it sort of, he went, hey, I didn't realize that guy was so fast. I was underthrowing him because he was so fast, that sort of thing.
Got on the phone and talked to Veach. Wanted to get some more information from Veach about Justyn Watson.
Yeah, the unprompted comments are the ones that kind of like make you raise your eyebrows. But, Jesse is right. He was asked specifically about Watson. when it comes to wide receivers, and I'm just going to toss out some names here over the past 5, 6 years, 7 years maybe, of players who looked good during OTAs, but once the pads came on, they kind of disappeared. Antonio Callaway from last year. Brett Veach was saying, hey, he's a guy I really look forward to seeing. Mahomes talked about him, and Callaway did look good out there at OTAs, then disappeared. Well, he got hurt at camp, but then he disappeared. Frankie Hammond. A lot of longtime Chiefs fans remember Frankie Hammond.
Love Frankie Hammond.
Definitely the all OTA team. Weston Dressler, remember the Canadian import. I think it was the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. He looked good out there, and then all of a sudden disappeared. Fred Williams, a fan favorite, a preseason darling, but just couldn't make the team. And this is why, I mention those names because we have to be careful, and fans have to be careful when they're reading all these reports. And it goes back to, again, the pads are not on. Players are supposed to look good when they don't have the pads on. And then when the tackling starts happening, that's where we're really going to get a good idea. But yeah, certainly you can use this as a reference point. But we got to see these players with the pads on. Andy Reid even mentioned this at the end of rookie minicamp. He's like, we got to see the pads come on. This is the only way we can properly evaluate these players.
I think you can make the case that wide receiver is the one position that that really stands out in situations like this, right? You can tell. Look, everybody's got speed, and you can tell who's fast and who is not as fast as you might have thought. You can tell who can catch a punt or a kick, and that sort of thing. But really, when it comes to a performance that might resemble something like we might see with pads on, or on game day, catching running routes and catching footballs. Those are things we that can be seen at a practice, and so it's one reason we talk about wide receiver as often as we do during this. Even in years when the Chiefs had their wide receiver room all locked up, you still talked about what you saw a wide receiver do in camp. So, all right, hey guys, let's take a break here. I want to stay on wide receivers, but we'll do that after we take a break, and we'll be right back.
Buying your first home is a huge milestone, but the journey there can be confusing. First Federal Bank of Kansas City is here to make it simple. After nearly a century of serving the KC community, our loan advisors have experience in every type of housing market. With a short phone call, we can give you a free rate quote and talk through loan options. No pressure, no obligation. The road to home ownership can be simple with First Federal Bank. Get started with a free quote at ffbkc.com/homes. First Federal Bank of Kansas City, because banking is personal. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There is Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all of the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening. Okay, we're back on SportsBeat KC with Chiefs beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell. And when we left off, guys, we were talking about the wide receiver room. Jesse mentioned 5 or 6 wide receivers, depending on what they keep. I think it's 6. I think it's always been 6 with the Chiefs. I think there is an interesting decision to be made, and this is the beginning of the decision-making process for the Chiefs, who number 6 and number 7 are, because 6 will make the team and 7 won't. But there are good candidates, and I think, Herbie, that there are plenty of good candidates because it's not obvious who the 6th one is. You could, it could be, I don't have the list in front of me, but when I did see the list, I counted 8 that I thought could be, Chiefs wide receivers this year. And usually I'm looking to find a 6th one. And now I'm looking to get rid of a couple that I think could be and would end up on other NFL teams at some point. So, just fascinating candidates like Justyn Ross and Daurice Fountain is such an interesting guy too. What do you think the separation points are going to be for wide receiver?
we know that as of right now, they have 13 wide receivers on the roster. So if you're going to go with the top 4, this is Mecole Hardman's a lock. JuJu Smith-Schuster is a lock. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a lock. I'm going to say SKyy Moore is a lock. So now all of a sudden you're battling for 5, 6, and 7. Daurice Fountain, I think, has an edge simply because the Chiefs know what he can do, and they got to find replacements for guys like Byron, Pringle, and Marcus Kemp, both of whom were gunners last year on special teams. They don't have that as of right now, but I think Daurice Fountain is a guy who can step in there. Now all of a sudden you're down to 2, maybe battling for that 6th spot, and he also has to be able to contribute on special teams. I think they're going to take a really hard look at Josh Gordon, okay? Remember last year they signed him, spent some time on the active roster, then he went back to the practice squad, and Veach was saying we need to give him time to learn the scheme because he joined the team not during training camp but as the season was going, and so he's going to be a fascinating guy to watch as well. We mentioned Watson, who had 4 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's the only offensive player in Bucs history to record a sack, and he did that on special teams where he stopped a fake punt. The fascinating thing about this roster right now is Cory Coleman, NFL experience, Omar Bayless, NFL experience, Mathew Sexton, NFL experience. So they have experienced players battling for those spots. And so it's going to be really, really interesting to watch. And the last guy we cannot forget, their 5th round draft pick last year, Cornell Powell. Okay, we don't forget about Cornell Powell. He spent last year on the practice squad. He was a late bloomer at Clemson. So, maybe that time on the practice squad did him well. We'll obviously have to see how this all works out.
Remind us why, he didn't make the team last year. What was it about him that was he just not as developed as they anticipated?
I think that's a fair assessment. And not only that, the pads came on. I remember during training camp, we're watching him start off working with the 2s, and the next thing you know, as camp progressed, he's down there with the 3s. And then, you ask Eric Bieniemy what's going on with Cornell Powell. And then, instead of mentioning his skill set, Bieniemy starts off with he's got a beautiful soul. And we're like, okay, he's not making the roster if that's the only thing you can think about. But I think a lot of that had to play the role in that. He just didn't grasp the system yet, but maybe the time on the practice squad helped him.
Now, look, you want to have a beautiful soul. Well, don't get me wrong. A beautiful soul is a good thing to have, but you better have a grasp of the offense as well. And you're absolutely right, Herbie, about the special teams aspect of this. That's, you've got, the gunner doesn't have to be a wide receiver, but it helps to have, it's got to be a person of speed. It's going to be somebody who's, a defensive back, wide receiver, so important in the Dave Tobe special teams. And that's why Tobe always has input on the draft as well. So,
Here's the interesting thing, Blair. When you look at the roster now, and I forgot to mention, because Demarcus Robinson also occasionally chipped in as a gunner. So you were talking about 3 wide receivers who did a lot of stuff on special teams, and Mecole Hardman is a returner. So this is where, when you look at the makeup of this roster right now, you gotta, like you mentioned, you gotta focus on not just their ability to catch the football, but their ability to help out on teams.
We've talked about this, Herbie. I mean, again, I'm not here to just rain on parades and stuff, but a lot of these things you're mentioning, Justyn Ross is kind of coming in behind. Like, he doesn't have NFL experience. You don't really think of him as a special teams guy. I wouldn't at this point. Andy Reid made comments about how he was, rusty a little bit at rookie minicamp and kind of trying to get back in the flow of things. And I mean, reports are right now that he's just not quite the same explosive level as he was the freshman year when you saw those crazy highlights. So again, it's been interesting just to sort of read the hype with Justyn Ross, and then also see, I mean, Chiefs social media has put out all these one-handed catches he's made and kind of propped him up as well. But yet, to me, if he's making this roster, like, you tell me here, if he's making the roster, Josh Gordon can't make the roster, right? I mean, I
think that's a fair argument, because now, we look at this roster, who's going to be making it, and you have to make the argument on why this guy won't make it. You look at Justyn Ross and you look at Josh Gordon. Gordon obviously comes with the experience, but they're both big receivers. Okay, Gordon's 6'3", Justyn Ross is 6'4". So, they're about the same height. But this is a matter of, when you make those kinds of decisions, where's the upside? And who has the most upside here? And I think it's going to be Justyn Ross simply because he's younger.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say by a decade or so, right? I mean, he's
Well, it's a fascinating topic. And like I said, whatever the expression is, the cat's left the barn when it's come to Justyn Ross. I mean, it's going to be something we're talking about every day at training camp. It's going to be something that's watched by every single fan that goes there, all those sorts of things. But it's just fascinating how it's played out, because it feels like, when he was undrafted and then signed by the Chiefs, everybody thought the Chiefs got a steal. And then ever since then, the comments have been fine on him, but then like the social media has been all these crazy one-handed catches. And then the reality is like the Chiefs have about 10 or 11 dudes at receiver that all can play. So that's going to be one of the main things at training camp. And I think we already know that going in.
Let's go back to the video of one-handed catches. There's no defender around him. Okay, so he's making the catch. He's wearing shorts. That one highlight that the Chiefs shot out there on Twitter, he's on the sideline, and that looked like just air. Okay, there was nobody around him. So we have to always take that into consideration. And then camp is where we figure out who's working with what. Okay, if Justyn Ross is working with Patrick Mahomes and the ones at the start of training camp, now all of a sudden, that's where your radar starts going off. Okay, let's see what the Chiefs are thinking here, because there's a certain rotation that they're going to run. And if he's drawing a lot of reps with the 2s and 3s, like if he's working mostly with Chad Henne, that now all of a sudden you get a good idea of what they're thinking.
Hey, Travis Kelce talked up that one-handed catch, the one that made the rounds on Twitter. Kelce was really excited about it, kind of chastised Ross for not celebrating it even more. Man, you got to show him. You got to be proud of a catch like that. So, a highlight like that shows an upside that maybe another player doesn't have, might not have. I imagine the Chiefs or whoever is in charge of their social media account would gladly post everybody's highlight catch, if it's as special as the one that we saw with Justyn Ross. Justyn Ross was the one who made it. And so that's why you're right. There's some irrational exuberance in the Twitter world and the social media world when something like that happens. I'm with you, Herbie. Let's see what happens when the pads come on and it's 95 degrees in St. Joe and you're going against L'Jarius Sneed and all of that. But it is fascinating, and I love that there are I love that there are so many candidates to watch and to pay attention to with the Chiefs wide receivers. All of a sudden, losing Tyreek Hill, which changed the whole nature of the wide receiving core. It just doesn't seem like where that could be a weakness. It doesn't necessarily have to be a weakness for the Chiefs. It's not going to be a weakness for sure. That's the wrong word. But are the Chiefs diminished by not having Tyreek Hill? Certainly, he's such a unique talent. But I just think there's enough there and enough weapons and more depth. I do believe more depth at wide receiver than there has been in recent years. Let's stay on the offense and talk about the running back position. I'm speaking of pass catchers. When we look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that was one of the selling points for him as a first round draft pick back in in 2020, and those numbers haven't been there for him as a wide receiver. Of course, he's been injured. His playing time is not what it would be had he been healthy. But I think he goes into training or goes into OTAs as running back one, but not I don't know if you guys think that. I believe that he's running back one, but it's not a strong lead on other candidates, and we've seen the Chiefs use that position in a shared mode over the last couple of years. I wanted to talk about this because I saw where did Darrell Williams just sign?
The Cardinals.
Cardinals. Okay. I liked him. I thought he was a pretty useful guy. Chiefs got a lot of mileage out of him. But I don't think the position is weakened because he's not there. I think there are other strong candidates. how does the running back competition play out, Herbie? Who's in the lead and who and how big is that lead?
Well, and I think Ed Blair is in the lead by a lot. Okay, at the number 1 spot, but he is going to get some competition. I think the biggest competition is going to come at the 3 spot. Ronald Jones, who the Chiefs signed to a 1-year deal, he's not the kind of running back that Edwards-Helaire is. We have to, when we talk about his receiving aspect, last year throughout training camp, remember they moved Greg Lewis over from wide receivers coach to the running backs coach. And Greg Lewis, as we all know, played wide receiver in the NFL, and that was supposed to help them throw more. But unfortunately, Edwards-Helaire got hurt, spent time on the injured reserve for 5 weeks. So that kind of set back their plans. But I think with a full offseason where he's healthy, it'll be Edwards-Helaire as their top guy, Ronald Jones as their number 2, and then number 3 gets really, really interesting. Derek Gore is a physical runner. Isaiah Pacheco is another physical runner, but he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. They got some intriguing undrafted free agents. Jerrion Ealy, who the Chiefs list as a running back and wide receiver. Taylor Fleet Davis, their undrafted free agent out of Maryland. His forte is as a receiver. That's what he did at the University of Maryland. So those guys are going to battle for the number 3 spot, and that's where it's going to get really interesting.
Pacheco's a guy to keep an eye on. Just an interesting guy, somebody who we didn't know much about at all going into the draft, but someone who the more you read about him and see him play, the more you like him and think he has a chance at this. Well, let's stay in the backfield and talk about a player whose roster spot is absolutely secured. And there is, probably if you had to list the players whose roster spots are locked in, this player would be, I think, in the top 10, and that's Michael Burton, the fullback. Not a household name, but nobody statistically is as productive as Michael Burton. And I know, Jesse, you've got a story coming up on him. Whenever he came into the game last season, I thought, well, maybe he doesn't get the ball, but if he does, something good's going to happen. And statistics prove something good happened every time he touched it.
8 running plays, 8 first downs. Can't do any better than that. So, I talked to him last week, and he was great. Great to talk to about all this sort of stuff. And obviously, he wanted to sign in Kansas City because he knows Andy Reid loves to have a fullback, and he was the fullback for him this past season. And it's fascinating, and I'll get into this in the story, but the short yardage success takes a lot of different things happening, and it's not just Michael Burton. Obviously, it's schematics, it's things that the Chiefs do that are pretty creative. And this is something, they weren't great in short yardage the year before, but they were a lot better last year and moved the chains at a better clip to keep those drives going. And I think there are some reasons for that, some personnel changes that helped with that. But Michael Burton back signed with the Chiefs, one of those coveted fullback spots in the NFL. Not everybody loves them or uses them the way that the Chiefs do, but 8 for 8 on first down rushes when he got it. I think his average yards to go was somewhere around 1.2 or so, I think, when I looked it up. So, but getting that yard, it's really important. And even as he spoke to me about, you give Patrick Mahomes a fresh set of downs, you feel good about doing your job and being able to help the offense. And as explosive as this Chiefs offense is, anytime you can do that, that's a positive. So, we'll have a story coming out about that and kind of the fascinating things that go into the Chiefs short yardage, but they were successful with it last year, and Michael Burton played a big part of that.
You mentioned the fullback position, and what's unique about it is you look across the NFL, there are only certain teams, and it's like a handful of them that utilize a fullback. And the one common denominator in all of that is the West Coast offense. Before Burton signed here with the Chiefs, too bad Mellinger is no longer here because it's time to drink. He was in the West Coast offense with Sean Payton down there in New Orleans. And then, Payton loved him there. And, I was down in New Orleans and got to cover that last year when Burton was signed. And then you look at the San Francisco 49ers, under Shanahan, they have a stud fullback. And that's also a West Coast offense. So that's the common denominator. And you're right, Jesse. They're few and far between in the NFL. But Burton is certainly a guy that dependable. That's the best word to use for fullback, and that's what you need. You need a dependable fullback.
Yeah, and Jesse, you talk about whatever it was, 1 point whatever average yards to gain on the first down. Those are the hardest yards. It's the hardest yard to gain, right? When everybody knows what's happening and who's getting the ball, and they still did a terrific job in those situations last season. Well, all right, I said we weren't going to talk about the match because by the time this runs, it will already have been played. The golf charitable event in Las Vegas that includes Patrick Mahomes, who's teamed up with Josh Allen against Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. We won't preview the match, but I'll ask you guys who will have won the match. By the time this airs, we'll know. So you tell me, is it the young bucks of Mahomes and Josh Allen, or will the elder statesmen of Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady pull it off? Jesse, just give me a winner here.
Oh man, I don't want to be like talking trash on anybody here, but to me, golf seems like an older man's sport. You know what I mean? Like the more experience you have. So I'm going with the older guys. And I honestly think if the younger guys lose, that might be a positive. It means they're spending less time on their golf game. So I will go with the elder statesman on this one.
All right, Herbie.
I agree with Jesse. That's exactly what I was going to say. Golf is an older man's game. And look, Tom Brady was supposed to retire. So, he was working on his golf game off to the side. As much as Chiefs fans probably want Mahomes to win and Bills fans want Josh Allen to win this as well. But I agree with Jesse. You got to go with the old guys.
I'm going to make it unanimous. I agree. And, maybe we'll all be wrong and it'll be a great show tonight. Either way, I think it'll be a good show. It'll be fun TV and we'll watch. It's on TNT, by the way. Well, what am I promoting it for? It's already happened. So it was on TNT, in case you missed it. So, all right, guys, I had 4 or 5 other topics I wanted to talk about. We'll save them for next week because it's always fun talking Chiefs with Jesse Newell and Herbie Teope. Thanks a lot, guys. That'll do it for today. Thanks to First Federal Bank for presenting today's show. Shout out to the SportsBeat KC production team of Randy Mason, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. And tip of the cap to Chiefs beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell for sharing their insights. Did you catch the morning sports edition? It's the Star's digital sports page and includes Royals game coverage, NBA and NHL playoffs, and French Open coverage. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Hey, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC.